All right.
Oh,
All right. So let's see. We have attendance. Who do we have? We have Heather and Ruth Ann, Tanya, and oh crap, that's it.
and you count towards the quorum. So 4 of 7 is a quorum.
Perfect. Okay. And then we have Denise here as well. Okay, since we have exactly a quorum, I would entertain a motion for approving of the meeting minutes from April 21st, 2020.
A motion to approve.
A second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that is the minutes and public participation. So we have Tom. Oh, you guys are muted. Well done, it says it's connecting. Hey, Rick.
Hi.
Okay, well, we can't hear Ruth Ann and Tom, but
She's on mute.
yeah.
It is way past his bedtime.
That's so cute. All right, now we can hear you guys. Tom, do you have anything for public participation?
Not at this point, no, thanks.
All right. Well, we will move on to 5 for our charter review. So Amy and Jason went through and looked at section 8 of the charter. Amy or Jason, if you guys want to like walk through some of your changes and corrections you had.
This is Jason. Amy's going to go first. I'm just saying goodbye to some folks.
Okay. Amy, do you want me to share a screen, or do you want to share your screen, or do you want to just kind of read through things?
I was just gonna read through it. Did everybody get the highlighted copies?
Yeah.
Mine I highlighted.
I'm actually just now seeing the line items. I was trying to click in the document yesterday and today, and I couldn't see any red changes. And for whatever reason, right now I can. So I'll be looking at it while we go through it.
Well, the red line version is Jay's, and his comments are to the right. Mine,
Okay.
just section 8, and it had like highlights, like yellow highlights in mine.
We don't have the yellow highlight.
Oops. Here, let me share my screen then. I thought I had added that in the meeting or in the agenda. Share screen. Oh, Jason needs to enable it to share it. Let me just send it to everybody really quick.
Rebecca, you're all set. Anybody can share.
Okay. All right, we'll share. Screen 1. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. All yours, Amy.
Okay, so nothing on that page. Nothing on the next page. The top page 35 is the next thing I have right there. Okay, so this we talked briefly about last month when I was on, and this is the CIP group. That they're not being appointed no later than August 1st, and they can't get their work done by November 1st each year. And the reason for this is because the staff don't give the CIP budgets to the CIP group until mid-September. And the first meeting they normally have is the tail end of September, the 28th, 29th, or the beginning of October. So it's just not enough time. They would like till December, because Jay and I don't do anything with it until January anyhow. So they're just looking, I think we could push back when they get appointed, maybe make that September 1st. And then maybe by December 15th, so it's not into the holidays, we could do number 3 would be my suggestion.
Yep, that sounds good, and I have those written down on my copy of everything. So we're gonna move it to September 1st, and then in number 3, it would be December 15th.
Yep, that
Okay.
would be my suggestions.
All right,
Nothing on the next page. But under section D1A on page 37. Now, these, I think Jay might have done a better job wording them, but I'll explain what the issue is. Right now, on March 18th, the budgets are due to the Board of Finance. They may or may not get one from the Board of Ed. They always get one from the Board of Selectmen. But what it says is that notice of said hearing shall be published within 5 days after the submission of the budget. So if they're not submitting the budget until the week before the public hearing, there's no way that the notice could be published 5 days after the submission of it. Sometimes at the public hearing, we don't even have a Board of Ed budget. Like last year we didn't, this year we didn't. We got a total from them, but we didn't actually get a budget document for the Board of Finance.
What's the reason for that?
Because they don't feel they have to give it until that public hearing. And
Is there something that would give them that indication?
unfortunately, it says on or before the date set forth by the Board of Selectmen, the superintendent shall submit the Board of Education budget to the Board of Education. Said submission shall include submission items set forth in 84C1B1, and that's a number 2 right above it.
Mhm.
So it really doesn't spell out, like, there's nothing that says, like, maybe in the very beginning, it should say, you know, it says on or before the date set forth by the Board of Selectmen. This is under C1B. The first selectman shall submit the budget to the Board of Selectmen, and it should include XXX, which is fine. But then there's nothing to say by March 15th, the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen have to submit their budgets to the Board of Finance.
Can I just interject there? And Amy and I talked about this, and we're on the same page. And I'll use this year's budget circumstances as an example. When the governor issued the executive order outlining the different process that we would undertake for the budget this year, in terms of trying to figure out the amended dates as prescribed in, I think it's 7C, the interpretation from the town attorney is that the guidelines adopted by the Board of Selectmen are binding on everybody. The Board of Selectmen effectively sets the budget schedule, and it's the budget schedule that was set by the Board of Selectmen that the attorney pointed us back to when we looked to extend the process a bit this year in light of those executive orders. The circumstance that has practically developed is that that schedule hasn't really been taken as rote, hasn't been taken as though it has the power of law. And to Amy's point, the Board of Education hasn't adhered to it. What Amy and I worked up, and what she's explaining here, is trying to reword both of those sections to activate the intended purpose, which is to make sure that budget submissions by those two boards are available for public review before the public hearing. And as it is now, it's cloudy enough so that we've had a couple of years where you put a number on the board, if that, and that's your public hearing. Whereas we're looking to spend this much on administration, this much on government services, this much on public works, you know, whatever it is. So we're trying to make it worded in such a way that the public has an opportunity to review what the head administrator for the town, which is me, and the head administrator for the school, which is the superintendent, are recommending to our respective boards.
Okay.
Sorry about being long-winded.
So what you're saying is that if we just change this to 5 days before instead of after, that would make the
Well, or a set date.
okay.
The budgets from the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed are due by March 15th, period.
I also, I worked on specific language in what I sent to you that's a little bit more flushed out than that version. I don't know who's controlling that, but there it is.
Me. Yeah, so we can kind of walk through that when Jason does his stuff. So, okay, we're good on that one. And then your next one is in
The same kind of thing.
Okay.
Right.
Same kind of notice. And I think that might be it for me.
So those two sections are redundant. The 8.4B and 8.4C, they're redundant in that they speak to the processes that the town shall undertake and that the Board of Education shall undertake, but it's substantially similar. So I took that same amended language and I inserted it in the section pertaining to the town budget and to the section pertaining to the Board of Ed budget so that they sync up. Because what we're trying to do, we're trying to make sure that people also have an opportunity to come to a public hearing on both sides of the budget. We don't have a circumstance come out where the Board of Selectmen are ready to have their public hearing and 2.5 weeks later, the Board of Education is ready to have that hearing, because there might be people who only care about, one particular budget or one piece of one particular budget. If you're really interested in making sure the town assessor has more resources available, you're not really going to care so much about the other aspect of things, but you're going to be really excited about the town assessor.
Got it.
So this is Amy. So I do have one last one, and Jay and I disagree on this. That I'm not.
There's a reason why.
I am not sure why the Board of Finance is responsible for the annual report and the operations of the town.
And I said to Amy that I would be more inclined to agree with her perspective in 3 to 7 years. The way it really works is the Board of Finance publishes the annual report, but all the work is done out of my office. I don't know if there's statute that requires that. I mean, it looks like it references the general statute somewhere, but I don't know. Amy, did we look to see if that's a statutory requirement of boards of finance?
No, but I can tell you that I wasn't responsible for it as the Board of Finance person in Canton. My town manager was. I get that I would have to give the audit related pages or the budget related pages. That makes sense, but to actually be the ones responsible doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think they feel the same way when they're there reviewing the wording of it in the different departments and stuff. A lot of people know not a lot about the different departments. So it's a little weird when they're trying to approve it when they don't really have the knowledge.
If I may, I think the statutory requirement is just that an annual report is produced. I don't think it specifies where it comes from.
All right, so we can have this for a discussion.
In all seriousness, Amy's points are well taken, and we only disagree in that I wasn't volunteering my staff, but practically it makes more sense for it to come out of the selectman's office.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. So, okay.
So I'm willing to park that as a future discussion point in exchange for something else later.
Sounds good. Okay, so Jason, you want to walk through your stuff?
Sure. So one of the things in the last charter revision proposal, there were those 12 questions. Quite honestly, there were a couple of them that actually made some sense. I don't like simply referencing the Connecticut general statutes as the point for which a particular action is being undertaken. The general statutes are 16 volumes long. There are thousands of pages. And to simply say we're going to do what we're doing according to what the general statutes say doesn't give the layman who's not used to trying to find that stuff on their own an opportunity to really understand why. So I think that if it were me, I would rather the specific statutes, or at least specific chapters that are being referenced throughout the charter be identified, so that somebody can go and see what it is we're actually trying to talk about, instead of simply saying, well, there's a rule somewhere and I'm not going to tell you where to find it. It just seems, if you're interested in erring on the side of transparency, providing a statutory reference, or at least a chapter reference, helps to do that. So that's the first point that I made. And I just flagged that in 8.1a because it was the first reference of that in section 8, but I think that should be true throughout.
So I think that's a really good point. And is that something that we as the commission would need to do, or can we, when we have the attorney or whoever's looking at this, like afterwards, can we just tell them to do that for everything that's in this charter?
That you could do. Yeah, I don't think you guys need to spend time pouring through the statutes trying to figure out. I mean, the reality is most of these are going to be in Chapter 7 anyway, which is the municipal powers section. Not all, some of the taxation stuff's in Chapter 12. But I don't expect somebody who's not immersed in this stuff to be able to find that on their own. You know, that just doesn't seems like if we want to make this a usable document for everybody, if you can make it easier for people to read, that would be better.
Yes, I agree.
I think, though, you have to be careful that you don't restrict yourself by reference to a statute that might apply more strictly to towns that are governed without charters and that are statutory towns. There are several of those. So I think you have to be careful with the language, that it doesn't restrict unduly what you want to do in our own charter.
But I hear what you're saying. I'll throw out as an example, though, that if you're talking about when we're talking about taxation, most of these powers are under Chapter 12 of the general statutes. If you were talking about referenda, most of those are under, or if you're talking about elections, that's under Chapter 9. So I think you can reference those in a way that's encompassing enough to at least point somebody to some additional information that might help clarify a question or a concern that they have, without simply saying, again, I'm not being facetious, there's 16 volumes of the general statutes. Good luck. You know, I mean, I've been working with this stuff for 15 years and it still takes me a while to find things. Somebody who's never looked at them before has no hope.
But even if you direct them to a particular chapter, I'm not sure if they're not somewhat versed in these, that's terribly hard. But
Well,
I have a problem with it.
If the commissioner is open to it, we can at least have an attorney look at it at a point in time, and then you guys could decide before making a recommendation to the selectmen whether to do it or not. I think that falls under one of the administrative changes that would be, or one of the technical changes that we're expecting in one of the questions. I think the next one is just a typo. Yeah, there were typos all through the section. I don't know who wrote this, but it's pretty clear that this chapter was written from somebody other than who wrote the rest of them, because the typos that I've identified and that popped up aren't present in other parts of the charter.
Right.
So this is just a typo.
Yep.
So it's just a typo.
It was spell out general state statute.
At the very least. So back to that initial point, if you're not gonna reference the specific statutes, at least tell people that CGS stands for the Connecticut General Statutes.
I think it's in one of the beginning sections, because when I very first read this and I was like, what the heck does that mean? And then I kept reading and it was like the next line down, it was like, oh, the Connecticut General Statute, or it was somewhere in this document that I read. So
8B, first of all, there are typos ahead of that, but the line that I struck out just seemed to be redundant to the last sentence and to the next sentence. And maybe somebody else has a different reading of it, but I just thought that line was redundant after having already outlined what the process was. I don't view that as a material change.
Just jumping in, the general statute shows up under the incorporation papers of the town. It says we are ruled by that. So, sorry, I was late, so I'm jumping in late.
No worries. Thanks, Jimbo.
So Jim's on a phone, Rebecca. So do you want to tell him where we are? What page we're on?
I'm actually on the computer too. I just don't have a camera so you can see my beautiful face.
Oh, you're Jim USR. That's creepy.
Yes, Jim the user. I'm the username.
Okay, so you can see what we're talking about then.
Exactly, yes, it's scrolling and everything.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is redundant.
Yeah, it would be because the whole town is incorporated under following the Connecticut State statute, so we don't have.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this one, I don't know where we are, but this change here, the November to December 1st, I just was trying to reflect that there had been intention of pushing that back. Amy's suggestion of December 15th is fine. Even if you wanted to go so far as to have the CIP submissions due at the same time department budgets are due, I don't think that poses any logistical challenges from in terms of the work that Amy and I do at that point in time.
Okay.
You know, I was really just flagging this as the November 1st date needs to be.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Okay. Let's see.
Now, would that December thing have to be covered under a question, or is that something we can just change? Would that be one of the four questions?
Rick, do you have an opinion on whether or not that would be a technical change versus a material change?
Rick, you're muted.
Which change, this one or the prior one?
The one November 1st to December 1st or December 15th?
I think it's a technical change.
Okay.
So when we do our questions, we're gonna have, one of our questions is gonna be to accept technical changes that we've highlighted, like kind of a general overall changes that have been made to the document that are just technical and grammatical.
That's the intention, yeah.
Okay.
I believe that's technical.
Okay. So our next comment on Jason's side was from the public hearing on the town budget on page 46, to have it be the 5 days prior to the Board of Selectmen holding in the initial public hearing.
Right, this is that cleanup language that we were talking about, and it's mirrored identically in the section talking about the public hearing process for the Board of Ed, with the exception that I changed the first selectman to the superintendent of school.
Yes.
And again, that's just to give the public 5 days to actually review what's going to be heard at that hearing, rather than saying, we're here at the public hearing, what do you think? Well, I don't have anything to show you.
Yes.
That's not fair to the taxpayers to have them, to ask them to participate in a public hearing and not tell them what it is that's being heard.
I've actually had people complain about that.
Yeah, so have I.
This is Amy. There was actually a lot of comment about it at the one this year because it was held at the auditorium because we were doing something else after. And there was a ton of comments like, why is the town not giving the Board of Ed the opportunity to share their stuff? Why is it all town? Which wasn't the case at all. It was the town was the only one that had anything available.
And then immediately after that public hearing, they walked down the hall to the Board of Ed room and had their meeting where they presented the budget to themselves. They had it the same night. They could have just thrown it up on the screen the same way we did and say, this is what we're going to be talking about in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I agree with it, so.
And again, the way I wrote that, just, you don't have to go back, but the way I wrote that, it's a stopgap to being able to proceed further into the process until you've given the public an opportunity to review what it is you're starting from. So you can't get to second base without having touched first base first.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna skip, what is this? Section 8.5-4. We're gonna skip that and we'll come back to it because this is part of our second discussion for tonight. So I'm just gonna see what else you have down here. I don't think there was much else.
I think it was technical from here.
Yeah,
Some wording stuff, but nothing of any meat.
yep, okay. So is everybody good with the comments and corrections that Jason has made and Amy?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, they sound good.
cool. Okay, so now on to the failure of the budget with the 3 referendums. So at our last meeting, we talked about having that.
1 second.
Oh, yep.
Just to interrupt. If we're all in agreement on the technical things, should we not go ahead and put that in the form of a motion to put as one of the questions so we can put it away?
So before you do that, Jim, this is Jason.
Okay.
Before you do that, the only thing that we looked at were technical and grammatical changes in Chapter 8. So if you're looking to do any of those technical or grammatical changes throughout the other 10 chapters of the charter, I haven't done that. I don't know
I've
if,
gone through some of them.
right.
Okay.
I don't think you want to do that as a
I'm
motion.
coming in
until you
late.
have-
That's fine. That's fine.
So I think regardless, one of our questions that we're gonna have is to accept technical changes that have been made to the entire charter. So that would cover everything. So that covers one question, and then we have to come up with our other couple. And this is going to,
Actually, the questions are for the Board of Selectmen to determine.
yes.
Right.
We make recommendations, they decide the questions.
Not the wording, though.
Even the wording of a question is yours.
We'll
Okay,
we'll give
question.
what we think, and then if you have any changes to make.
Right. They can deny the whole thing. I mean, that's their option. I'm just looking to narrow down what more we have to do to get it ready to present to the selectmen. I mean, we've covered quite a bit. We've done, I haven't been to every meeting, but we did finance director. And other than solving the section 8 there, I mean, we're pretty much in agreement. Was there other things that I missed?
I don't think so. I think we just really had discussions on things. No decisions or anything had been made, and the ones that you had missed. So. Are we good to move forward?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right,
Yep.
so back to our 15% turnout discussion. All of us were in favor of the 15% turnout, but the part that we kind of all were not agreeing on was if there should be a cap on the number of referendums that we hold. So I would say let's kind of pick up on that discussion if anybody's thoughts have changed or anything like that.
I think going back, I think someone was supposed to look at some notes or look at somebody else's wording on how they, another town had done it, and then to share with it for tonight's meeting. Did I
Was that you, Rick?
understand that right or
Yeah, it
no?
was. I did some research. I didn't find specific references to particular towns. Found a couple of studies that compared various rates of adoption and numbers of referendum and criteria for adoption. And it included the fact that there were several towns that had threshold turnouts to be adopted, but it didn't identify which ones they were. And I offhand don't know, and I didn't do enough research to find it.
Well, the question I see it as, sorry. The way I see the question is, one, the 2%, we're all in agreement, get rid of that and make the responsibility of the end run fall on either the Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance. Is that correct? Is anybody in disagreement with that?
Could you state that again?
Essentially, however we get through our referendums, when it comes to the end and we don't have a yes vote on a budget, that the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen would make the decision on the budget for that year.
Yes, I think that's what it would come to, but I think the question that we first have to ask and answer is, are we going to put a cap on it so that it does go to the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen? If it
Okay, that's why I was making sure. I'm sorry I did miss the last meeting.
No worries.
Then my thoughts were, the less we change, the less confusing it would be. Now, I think we should have 3 referendums, and if Rick wants, and I don't think it's a bad idea to make sure there's participation with this percentage thing, but I think we should keep it at 3 referendums. That's what everyone's used to. If we make a complete change to the process, we're going to get no votes in November to change the charter, and then we're going to end up with the 2% staying in place, unless we separate the question. In other words, how do we get there, and what do we do at the end?
So I do agree with Jimbo that I think we should keep the 3 referendums, as well as the 15% turnout, so that if you get the 15% turnout and they still vote no by the 3rd referendum, at that point, my feeling is that people are going to vote no because they don't want an increase, no matter what. They don't care. They don't look into the budget. They don't look into what each department wants and needs and things like that. So I would say keep the 3 referendum limit and then pass it back to the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen to make the final decision. What do others feel and think? Tanya?
I'm agreeing with you, to be honest. I mean, I've gone back and forth in my head. I do agree that too much change is probably going to backfire, and to stick with the 3, just because we discussed last time, it's $5,000 each time. People are used to the 3 number. We are going to change it to a percentage of a turnout to come out to 15%, which I do like, and I think that is going to be positive for us, and hopefully it won't end up resulting in going back to Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen making the decision by doing that, but it's also a good fallback just in case. So I'm okay with that.
Ruthann?
Yeah, I think it sounds good. I mean, if you give them too many opportunities, I think they lose interest, and they may just vote no to get it over with, or they just won't do anything at all. And probably doing the 15% might encourage people to either participate, because you're going to have 3 public hearings before each of the referendums. So they're going to have 3 chances to voice their opinion, and then they'll have 3 chances to vote. So, and then make people say, if you really don't understand this, please ask questions. I think people are starting to wake up a little bit and realize that, it's their budget, and the town has to work with something. But we do have to get rid of the 2%.
Yes. All right. Rick,
Rebecca?
Oh, yep.
I just have one comment on the 15%. Right now we have terrible participation. So what happens when you guys set it as a threshold of 15% and you don't get it?
Then it's an automatic approval of the budget that is presented.
Okay, perfect.
Rick, are you going to say something before?
Well, hang on, on Amy's comment there, that's what scares me about both this question being one question. In other words, we could have one question which basically says, if we don't have a 15% turnout, the budget is adopted. And then the second question could be, if after 3 referendums, not getting into percentages, after 3 referendums, if a budget's not adopted, then it would be decided by the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
So in my mind, it's 2.
That wouldn't work.
because
So-
one's dependent on the other, right, Jason?
What's that?
You're saying it's not going to work because one's dependent on the other.
Well, if the, what Jim was just describing would actually strengthen the 2% and solidify it. So if you had to have a 15% threshold or a budget, in order for a budget to be, a budget vote to be valid, you're not going to get that. So then Rick's, well, the stopgap is to have the Board of Finance, I'm assuming the Board of Finance, set it if it's not passed within
No.
Brenda. Am I missing?
If I might, Jason, yeah. The initial referendum, the Board of Finance sends a budget to referendum. If the referendum vote is yes, the budget is approved. If the referendum vote is no, but you have less than a 15% turnout, the budget is still deemed approved.
Right, and that makes it 2 questions.
Budget
One
is
is just
deemed-
changing.
What's that?
If you have 12% turnout and the majority of voters who turn out vote no, because it's below 15%, it's deemed approved?
Yes, because that's not a sufficient turnout to reverse the recommendation of the Board of Finance.
So what happens
What's your-
if, what
You have,
happens?
you have a 12% turnout and 6% of the town's voters, which is probably 3.5% of the town's residents, decides against a budget. It's a small group that can control.
So what happens if you have 8% turnout and the prevailing vote is yes?
Then it's still below the 15% and the recommended budget is approved.
Okay, so the referendum is to, is effectively to overturn the recommendation of the Board of Finance.
Essentially, yes.
All right. Just as a point of reference, Vernon recently had a drive-up referendum, although in contrast to what the executive orders allow. But they recently had 110 people vote in a town of 30,000 people, and the vote went 106-4. That would not pass, right?
Correct.
That would pass because the turnout is less than 15%.
So the budget would have passed in that case.
Except I don't think they had, did they have a referendum or did they have a town meeting?
They had a town meeting and a drive-up vote. Still against executive orders.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the 50% that Rick's looking for, and I'm not necessarily against that, should not wait for the next charter revision. In other words, revisions occur every couple of years. We could certainly recommend all this stuff to the Board of Selectmen, and they can make the decision on how to do this.
Well, if we're going to make recommendations, we ought to look at it. And putting it forward just so that you know in advance that the Board of Selectmen's going to reject it, we're not doing our job. I think we're trying to be realistic. Everybody's trying to be realistic.
Well, in that case,
Again,
if we're being realistic, I don't think the 15% would pass by the voters, and I think it would blow the whole thing out of the water.
I think what would blow it out of the water is having 3 referendums that people vote no, and then you disregard totally what they have to say without any charter rationalization. Which is what you do if you have 3 referendums, they all fail, and then you adopt whatever you want. To me, that is not very democratic.
Well, but in that case there, we're discussing the 15% not showing up and voting no. Am I missing something? Maybe I just don't see it the same way.
You ask that question again?
In other words, I see these as 2 separate questions. And the first one in my mind is the 2%, which we're all agreed needs to go. And we're all in agreement that after whatever number of referendums, that the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen would make the final decision if it was no.
We're not all in agreement.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I could come to that position. At our last meeting, I stated that I thought if the budget was not approved, it should continue to go to referendum, assuming that the 15% threshold was met. I didn't put a cap on it and allow somebody else to set it. And I think the trade-off is you put the 15% threshold in. It assumes that there's significant support for the position that passes with that kind of turnout. And that, I think, is going to result in better budgets for the town. And if you then chop it off on the back end, or you don't allow additional referendums, or you have an automatic stopgap that the budget can be set anywhere the Board of Finance wants, that's also not a good trade-off for the voter.
So,
Am I being clear or not?
yeah, I follow.
Yeah, I think you're clear. I just think that we're not in agreeing, and
No.
people aren't agreeing. I think that's all that it is. I think that you're clear in what you're saying, and it's coming across. But I just don't think that we're agreeing on it.
Can I just interject?
Which, that's fine.
Can I just interject a point that I think the commission should keep in mind? The whole point of doing this charter revision this quickly this year is to hit the presidential electorate.
Right.
It's going to be the highest turnout that we will ever have for an election in any town in Connecticut. So worrying about what you're going to do is put forward a document that's going to get a true consideration from a representative sample of the population. So keep in mind that the electorate is going to be a lot different than you guys have ever seen it before when these things are considered. Last year, the 12 questions got smoked, but it was a municipal election year. It was almost as low of a turnout as you're ever going to see. The only thing lower than that is a budget referendum. So last year we had, what did we have? 2,000 voters. This year we're going to have somewhere north of 5,000 voters. So keep that in mind as you conduct your deliberations, that the electorate is very different.
So we haven't heard from Nicole or Heather on their thoughts and opinions on the 15% and whether there should or should not be the cap of the referendums.
I don't think Nicole's on.
Oh, maybe Nicole's not on, but Heather is. Heather, you want
I guess it's my turn.
to?
Taking all of this in, I have a lot of, I'm more in agreement with what everybody's saying. I'm trying to play out different scenarios in my head on how this is going to work and how it's going to be accepted. I'm thinking 15 is a little bit too high. I think because what's going to happen is, and this is just as I'm trying to think it through, I think in the beginning, we're going to see, if this does pass, we're going to see people get really upset because they're going to come out and vote, and we're not going to hit 15, and it's going to be approved. And that could be good for some people, but I think the majority of the voters have a tendency to vote no for the budget. And I think it might upset people. I think bringing the number down to a more manageable or closer number, I don't know. I'm kind of concerned with the 15. I don't think we should do more than 3 though. I don't want to see us spending money just to try to get a budget. I think it's just defeats the purpose.
So I got a question. So Jason, were you saying that this year we could see up to 5,000 people versus, I think we talked about there's a pool of about 8,000 in town?
Yeah, I mean, typically I would expect we see somewhere around 60% in a presidential election. But Heather's point actually nicely dovetails the point that I just made. The people that tend to vote in budget referenda vote no. But that's a very different electorate than the electorate as a whole, which is better represented by a presidential electorate. You're in a budget referenda, you're lucky to get 1,200 people who vote. In a presidential election, we're talking about 4 or 5 times that, 4.5 times that. So what you guys are working on, just to restate my point, what you guys are working on is not something that's going to be palatable to those who vote in referenda. It's a document that's going to be put forward to the voters to decide how to govern our town. So it's 2 different ways of thinking about things. It's almost like playing baseball versus football. You know, you're on football versus soccer. You're on a field that's 120 yards, but you're playing by very different rules and with very different opponents. So if I'm drawing a bad metaphor to 2 different sporting events, but the point is, it's not the same thing, the referendum electorate versus the general election electorate.
Yeah, I
So
think
Jason,
that's kind of the point with the, sorry about that, is the votes for the budget are such small turnout. And if we had an unlimited referendum, we could be September with a budget that doesn't look like anything that we began with in April and May. I mean, that's what happens with an unlimited number of referendums. Plus they cost money.
If you set that percentage at a high enough number, say 15%, which is a far more representative sample than 11 or 10 or 9%. Even that's not really stretching it. But what it's saying is that the people on the Board of Finance and the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen have some sense of what the community wants and needs. And that result of a referendum may not reflect totally what a community wants and needs. If the turnout is so low that a small group can dominate the result of a referendum. When the turnout is, if you've got like even 1,200 voters coming out, that means 600 people in a town of 11,000 or so. That 600 people can decide the fate of the whole community. I'd rather make it a little more difficult. Plus,
But isn't that how how we got here is people were upset about the town meeting making this decision, and we decided to go to referendum. And then they were upset that referendums went on, and they had changed it to the Board of Selectmen deciding. Then they got mad at the Board of Selectmen for deciding, and so they then put it to this 2%. And it's the same group or thought that has followed these changes.
You're giving the whole community a chance, the broader electorate, a chance to make this decision. You're not giving it to the same people who turn out to vote no on every referendum on every topic. You're giving it to the community as a broader, in a broader sense, to make the decision as to how we set our budget every year.
So can I just interject something that might kind of put this in a different context? If you set that 15% threshold, we have 8,400 voters in East Windsor. 15% of that is 1,260.
It's not a horribly high bar.
It's pretty close to what we get now. People need to be a little bit more aggravated than they have been, but not a lot more aggravated.
I agree with that. I think that the 15 is reasonable because we had done the math, I don't know, 2 meetings ago or something, and it would make people push a little bit and to say, hey, I don't like this, let me go out and vote. So I think the 15% is reasonable for what we have for registered voters and what we have for turnout over the past couple of years.
You guys don't need Amy anymore, right?
No, Amy, you're good. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Bye, thanks.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much.
So
Now that she's gone, she is the best.
she is.
oh yeah.
She's just such an asset.
I'll tell you, I listened to her at WPCA one night, and I was just amazed that she understood a lot more about this than a lot of people. It really was amazing. So, Rick, what if we did do your 15%, did a 3 referendum, and at the end of the 3 referendum, let's say the 15% show up, and they're voted down no, your idea is to continue the referendums till a yes?
Yes, essentially. That's what I would do. I could accept stopping at 3, but
I can hear Dearborn yelling now. Why are we spending $10,000?
What's that?
I could hear Dearborn yelling now. Why are they spending $10,000? You know, that's going to stop the question from getting through if we don't cut the referendums off and get rid of the 2%.
Again,
I'm not against your 15.
Well, I would disagree with you that certain people would not be upset if it went to 25 referendums. The people who should be upset are the people who care about the town and the services.
Also, to point out, again, one of the reasons of doing this in a presidential year is because it's going to be really hard for any particular side, whether it be the side that I prescribe to or the other side, to influence the outcome in a presidential election. That electorate is just too big in our town with the limited resources that any advocacy group would have to affect that. So whatever anybody for or against any of these questions would say is relatively irrelevant because you're getting such a large sample.
Which is why we're doing it now.
Is exactly why we're doing it.
Yep.
So I think for what we're hearing from everybody, whether they fully support it or mostly support it, is that we are in agreement of the 15% turnout rate with a cap of 3 referendums. And if at that time it's not passed, then it's going to go to the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen for a final decision.
Probably be the Board of Finance.
Just the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
I would agree with Rick.
Yeah, I would too. And I think there's a pretty good example of that. You know, they are the fiduciary agents for the town and they're self as such.
Well, I think that's the way we should put it out there then. I think any more discussion, unless somebody's got some better ideas, the quicker we put it to bed, the more confident we'll look of our decision.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm leaning towards. I kind of want to make a decision on this tonight and get something typed up to at least get language down on it so we can review that for next meeting. And then I guess one of my questions is, I don't remember dates in my head, but like, when do we need to get this to the attorney to look at and to review? Like mid-June?
I would yield to Rick on that.
Well, the sooner it gets there, the better, because these timelines have a way of running into each other.
Right.
It seems like once it goes to the Board of Selectmen, they have a certain amount of time to react to it. They can send it back for revision. They're probably not going to. And then they need time to hold a public hearing and do all that stuff. So there's a lot of flexibility in the end. You can pack it in and move it along fairly quickly. But the sooner we get to the town attorney with it, I think the better off we'll be.
Okay.
In terms of meeting our time frame.
So, Rick, you would be willing to go with a 15%, 3 referendums, and final decision?
Yeah,
by Board of
I would.
Finance?
I don't love it, but yeah, I would be willing.
Sorry about that. That's fine. Okay, cool. Then let's do that.
Okay. I will work on that and get some language typed up and share it with everybody. If we're good to move on from that topic, do we just want to talk about the town report, annual town report section that Amy or Jason had highlighted? Jason, do you have any more comments on that?
No, when Amy was referencing that she and I had a disagreement about it, it was facetious. That should come out of the selectman's office.
Okay, so we can change that then. Because I mean, all the departments do their own sections anyway, and they give it to whoever's in charge, right?
Right, and the treasurer or finance director works for the first selectman. The publication is currently it's run through CCM, which the point of contact is the executive assistant to the first selectman. And quite honestly, the Board of Selectmen has more of an understanding of what goes on in town departments and agencies than the Board of Finance does, just because of the nature of our roles.
Yeah. Okay.
So at our next meeting, if we have language, we could vote on our overall recommendation of the charter to be sent to the attorney for a review.
So would that mean we're going to go through all the grammatical errors, go for the language that we just discussed?
I think we could just have someone do the grammar and then
Yeah, I'll do track changes into Google Docs. You can see everything that was changed.
we'll just approve all the grammar changes at once.
Yeah.
And the number of questions, to me, what we've done is results in really 2 questions. 1, technical changes, and 2, the changes to chapter section 8. But it's up to the Board of Selectmen to decide what the questions are.
Do we want to change the treasurer for the finance director?
Yes.
I thought we had wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So
That's in my notes in my paper.
in the last set of questions, when they tried to do that, I wrote a 1-sentence insert into the very beginning, or the first reference of the treasurer, saying that I think I'm paraphrasing, but the finance director shall be the town treasurer and shall have all the powers and responsibilities therein outlined in the general statutes or something. And so therefore, any reference to the treasurer thereafter would allow it to be a finance director. The last group didn't go for that at all, and they kept it their way.
The other recommendation that I made was to, and I think you agree, Jason, was that some of the other department heads, where it says shall report to the first selectman, if we put the first selectman or his or her designee. It would allow for reorganization and for tax collector, for example, to be under the finance director.
Right. Rebecca, can you go to section 6.6?
Thank you. That's what I was trying to figure out where it was.
Scroll down. Okay. So here, 6D outlines, it starts earlier, I guess. Don't scroll too fast. Go up. Up. Up, 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 up.
Keep going.
There we go. So these are all of the positions that are reportable to the Board of Selectmen, and then there are some that are specifically reportable to the first selectman. One of the issues that I have, and somebody else in my position at some point in time may see things differently, but because some of these positions are direct reports to the first selectman, I can't develop a more pyramid structured organizational chart. So if I want to meet with all of my direct reports once every 2 weeks, that's, I think, 15 meetings. That's crazy. What I'm doing now, kind of as a workaround to this, is I have every Monday morning, I have a staff meeting with a department cluster. So for example, yesterday was the land use cluster. So any department that has some interface with land use, we get together once a month and have a land use meeting. Next week, it's the community services cluster. I have a finance cluster, public safety cluster, and then I have a whole senior staff meeting with everybody. What I'm trying to do with these is to get to a place where it's not everybody sitting around a hypothetical table. This is what's going on in the assessor's office. This is what's going on in the building department, because there's not a lot of value there. But in those clusters, to be able to do a deeper dive into issues that are specific to departments that might have some overlap, there's more value to that. To say, particularly in the land use side of things, that we have a development coming up that is going to require us to be considering, whatever we're considering, so that the health district and the town engineer and WPCA and the building official and the town planner are all on the same page with that at the outset of things, so that we can head off any issues that might come up and thereby improve customer service delivery. I can't officially do that in a lot of places, but Rebecca, if you go to 6.7, there are positions that I can. So for example, the building official does not need to report to the first selectman. It was 6.6, I'm sorry. The building official doesn't need to report to the first selectman. The town planner doesn't need to report to the first selectman, but the tax collector does. The assessor does. The treasurer does. So I couldn't elevate Amy as a finance director in charge of all things money, because the people who would fall under that finance umbrella still have to be, according to the charter, have to be direct reports to the first selectman. So it's not like I could develop a director level and then a supervisor level. I'm stuck with this really flat structure. The exception being to that is that I could reorganize the planning department and the building department and public works. But I can't do that on the finance side. We've already effectively done that in the community services side by giving Melissa Maltesi 3 departments and including Park Hill and the school in that. So I'm pretty much there on the community services piece. I'm not there on the finance piece. I'm not there on the land use piece. And public safety, none of them effectively work for me anyway. The police chief and the deputy and I work very, very well together. But the fire marshals and the fire chiefs, they come or they go if they want to. I don't have a lot of control there.
So wait, bottom line here is you want us to just change it to report to the first selectman or his designee?
Yep.
Oh, that's no brainer.
Tactical change.
And Jim, that also gets to what you're trying to get to long-term anyway.
So for this section right here for the town treasurer would this overall section be changed to finance director, or what would like be the technical change on this one?
The finance director shall be the town treasurer and?
Shall be or may be?
I think if we use maybe, we might be watching our pocketbook.
Yeah, we could change it for now to the town, the finance director shall be the town treasurer. At some later date, somebody might want to change it to may.
Okay. I will type something up and definitely look for feedback on that one.
Yeah, that's not a substantial rewrite, Rebecca. That's an easy thing.
No,
Yeah.
No, and I think we're all in agreement.
Yes. Yeah, that's been on my list since like day one when we first met. And I have it in all the sections there on 6.6, so. Okay. Anybody got anything else?
Were you gonna ask a question?
so are we going to vote next time on all the changes and recommendations? And then send it to the town attorney?
I
Yes.
think we should.
I mean, we can review next week, and if there's questions or changes, that's fine. We can have more discussion, but I would say by, let's just look at the calendar here. We have a meeting on the 19th. So either we vote on it and go from there, or we wait until June 2nd to make like the final push and push it to the attorney at that point.
Well, if we're pretty much in agreement, let's try and do it for the 19th.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But if there's any questions or anything that we need to revise, we still have at least one more week that I think we would feel comfortable with.
Well, and if we vote on the 19th, don't the selectmen have a meeting on the 21st?
Yeah, but we're not at that point, Jim. This is gonna go to
The attorney first.
us.
Oh, okay, gotcha, sorry.
Yeah, when that time comes, Jason, I'll probably look to you for guidance on, I'll just give it to you to get to the attorney.
Sure. And if you want help, well, you know what? You know how to get a hold of me if there's anything I can do.
Yep, sounds good. So I will have this together and I will make sure I send this out for Friday the 15th so you guys have the weekend to review it.
Good.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
If there's no other discussion, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Who's the second? Tanya? All right, Heather seconds. All in favor?
Hi,
All right, thank you guys.
have a great night, everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
See ya.
Good night.